brings me to this op-ed from Kurt Bardella, who says Democrats need to stop behaving as if there's a prize for showing restraint. He argues that the difference between the parties comes down to one thing. Republicans can go on the offensive while Democrats go on the defensive. Kurt writes, when Republicans have the reins of power, they do not hesitate to go after the very top. From Barack Obama's birth certificate to Hillary Clinton's emails and potentially Hunter Biden's laptop, the GOP is unapologetic about pursuing witch hunts for political gain. Joining me live now to discuss all of this is Kurt Bardella himself, who is an advisor to the DNC and the DCCC. And here on set is my dear friend, criminal defense attorney and MSNBC legal analyst, Danny Savalos. Kurt, we're going to start with you with that op-ed. Let's talk about Jenny Thomas. Let's talk about her through the lens of your op-ed. How do you think Republicans would react to this news if the tables were turned and it was the spouse or the partner of a liberal SCOTUS justice? Do you see Dems acting on this after this latest report?
Katie, if Republicans were in power and the sequence of events had happened, but to the Democrats, they would not hesitate to bring up not just the spouse, but the Supreme Court justice under oath in a public televised hearing and get answers about why is it that the spouse of a Supreme Court justice is actively participating in what can only be described as treasonous conduct, an effort to deliberately undermine democracy, to hijack democracy, and why is the said Supreme Court justice not out there denouncing this type of activity? You take an oath of office, just like everybody else, to uphold and defend the Constitution. When you let this stuff happen, when your own spouse is participating in an effort to undermine the Constitution, you can't be silent about it. And if you are silent about it, Katie, you're telling us right there that you believe in it, that you subscribe to it, that you're condoning it. Democrats need to get these people under oath. They need to get them in front of the hearing. They need to get them to have to answer publicly for their malfeasance and what I believe is point-blank treasonous conduct.
Danny, I like Kurt's plan, but you and I are lawyers. We're trial lawyers, right? We have to bring solutions to the table. What legal action could be done to be able to achieve what Kurt says is the goal?
Short answer, none. There are canons of judicial ethics that apply to federal judges, but amazingly, they don't apply to the Supreme Court. And in a sense, Justice Roberts has suggested that that's because the judiciary must be independent. In fact, that's why when people protest outside of the Supreme Court, I often think you folks don't really get civics. It's the one institution that's designed to be completely immune to protests, to signs, to pushing a candle through a paper plate and having a vigil. It's the one institution that we give lifetime tenure, something that the American system abhors, but we do it at a cost so that justices are immune from the pressures of outside forces. Now, one more thing on the only option I see, ethics aside, would be impeachment. But the last Supreme Court justice that was impeached was in the 1800s for treason, and he was acquitted. So that is a really, really high bar to meet.
Danny, quickly before I go back to Kurt, though, you use the word independent. Yes, your judiciary is supposed to be independent, but how can anybody credibly say, like Clarence Thomas, that he's independent if his wife is doing the stuff that she's doing?
I totally agree, and I would say the exact same thing if we were talking about the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband, who, by the way, represented Ross Perot as a lawyer. And, you know, as you probably expect, a lot of the spouses of Supreme Court justices are also lawyers, and lawyers are advocates. So there's going to be some degree, if they're still working in a firm, of advocacy, and that's why we have the rules of conflicts of interest. Judges are supposed to check that recusal. By the way, there really isn't, if a Supreme Court justice doesn't recuse him or herself, there really isn't a remedy for that. You can't say pretty please or can you reconsider, because that's the last stop on the appeal train. So there really isn't much recourse. We trust Supreme Court justices to do what's right, and maybe that is what is the problem in this situation, is that we are trusting Justice Thomas to do what's right, and he has no oversight, which is a design of our Constitution.
Sounds like a flaw. Kurt, I saw you tweeting about how you were surprised that Democrats didn't immediately start investigations into the Trump administration's handling of the pandemic as soon as they got into power. Now we see the January 6th committee is apparently fine with not even trying to get him to testify. At this point, Kurt, what is it going to take for the Dems to kick things into higher gear and to go on the offensive?
You know, I'm hoping, Katie, that the January 6th committee, as they get ready to have these hearings in just a couple of weeks, that they have a plan, that they have a choreographed, deliberate, plan of action that's based on the investigation they've been having, that they have mountains of evidence, of audio, of things that we don't know about that can drive this narrative. I just think back to the Benghazi Select Committee when Republicans didn't blink. to bring up Hillary Clinton to testify for more than 11 hours and face that type of grilling. I don't know how you can have a system that has Secretary Clinton at the time having to do that, but you let Donald Trump and people like Mike Pence and Ginny Thomas and Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon and Mark Meadows avoid that type of public setting. It's such a parody. And I'm telling you, we're seeing right now, at this very second, Republicans campaign for the midterms on the idea that they're going to do this to the Biden administration, that they're not going to hesitate to use the reins of power to go after the president's son, to go after this administration, to try to impeach the president, to try to impeach the DHS secretary they're talking about doing. So Democrats are about to get a lesson in how to wield power, whether they like it or not, if they don't step up right now, because they are the last line of defense of stopping Republicans from hijacking democracy. It's not about 2024, Katie. It's about 2022, because I promise you, if Republicans are allowed to regain a congressional majority, they will not certify a Democrat win in 2024. They are campaigning on the big lie. This check and balance that we're about to see with the January 6th Select Committee is perhaps the last guardian of defense that we have of our democracy and our process. And if we don't get answers from everybody who was involved, especially at the very top, this might be the last free and fair election we have.